This is Big Man Tyrone, and you're about to watch the MtG Cabal cast with your hosts, Woad, Thirsty, and Reptar. Sub to us on all your podcast networks at MtG Cabal Cast and YouTube.
All right, guys, welcome to the newest episode of the Cabal Cast. We've got a kind of a follow-up episode to a set release. We've kind of started doing this for a few sets now. So now that the dust has settled from Ikoria, what our opinions are on what's real and what's fake financially, just looking at what we've seen trend-wise, what we see single-wise, stuff like that, and justifications. And this is another one of those instances where neither of us know what the other has chosen, so we are going in blind. So, if you want to start us off, what do you think is real?
So, I actually started off a little more broad when I was thinking about this over the weekend, and I was curious how Ikoria has just been doing overall as a set to see if it fell flat financially. Not necessarily because of the bannings, but because of the hype and then the cards that actually made it into constructed formats. And my initial thought was, well, there's got to be a lot of interesting stuff here in Commander. You have Luminous Brood Moth, you have the Dirtle Turtle that you can cycle a bunch and then play, which isn't, it's not EDH-able, but it's starting to pop up in some mono red lists in Modern. And I thought, well, maybe some value is tucked away in here. But checking Dawn Glare, my suspicions of a set that just absolutely cratered came true. In a little over 12 days, the set dropped to 50% of what it was, from 125 down to the mid-60s. Thus, looking at this financially is a flop. That basically means that the value you're going to extract from a box is much less than you're going to wind up paying for them, regardless of how you're able to get them, unless it's direct from distro. So that was first and foremost, because I was very, very curious. Theros, like I said, was kind of iffy and eventually became kind of this failure, especially from the collector's edition side of things, because it hasn't really made that much of a splash. And Throne before that was great until cards started getting banned. So I was like, let's see where we are. All right, but looking at individual cards, I went through what was currently listed as the 10 most expensive cards in the set, and that's kind of been fairly steady for the life cycle of the set thus far after full spoilers and pricing was available. These 10 have kind of been locked into place with a little bit of shuffling. So the first one on my list has been the most expensive card in the set since I think it was spoiled after the third card on my list. The first one is Fiend Artisan. Fiend Artisan is currently like an $18 card, and to me, this card looks fake. It has all the telltale signs of a card with a fake price. There are no high-profile results. It sees Standard and Pioneer play, but the only results that are coming in for these formats are F&Ms being held on Arena or Moto. In Standard, it plays in a Rakdos or Orzhov Sacrifice deck, think Cat Oven. And in Pioneer, it's being played in Rally decks. All those decks are completely overshined in their current metagames, and this card really has no meta share in the world we live in right now, with Yurion, Gyruda, and Luros still hanging out. To me, this card is fake right now. An $18 price tag is not sustainable for this card in the long term.
It's interesting that you picked that, because that was one of the failures that I picked as well, because it has casual EDH appeal, and I get that it looks a lot like Birthing Pod, it looks a lot like any of those effects, but it's not. And the fact that it's slower, it's just not nearly as good. I agree, I don't think it's a real price point. I don't think that, at least in the short term, this is something that should be $15, unless there's some absurd tech that I just haven't noticed, which is obviously perfectly possible. That's just one that I had thought as well, that I was like, I don't think this is real. I know we haven't sold a whole bunch of them. I haven't seen a lot of people looking for them, but I guess there's a market somewhere, maybe.
I think it's
hard to say.
I mentioned on a couple of cards, I think this price is a hopeful price for the future, which to me means, because I was the one that wrote it, that this is a card priced based on what will happen when other things around it in the format are removed. So when Yurion is removed from Standard, and Luros is removed from Modern, and Yurion is removed from Legacy, Fiend Artisan can actually begin to play. And I brought this up quickly I'll bring it up again so you can see the stocks graph, etc., and what this card does. To me, this card actually seems like it could play in a deck in Legacy called Nick Fit, which is just based on value creatures and bringing back your 1 and 2 drop creatures. Yeah. That deck didn't die with the banning of Deathrite Shaman. It relied more on a card called Veteran Explorer, which is an EDH All-Star. So being able to recur your value engines like that, or even tutor through your deck for something up to Siege Rhino, this is Birthing Pods 5 through 8, essentially, in that deck. I think it has the ability to play there, but not while Urion is running rampant in that format. You know, Lurrus and Zerda, or whatever the Boros companion is, were removed from that format. And so Urion is just there flickering Arkham's Astrolabes. And the value that's generated from that has essentially allowed a more controlling format to exist, where Fiend Artisan is not that great. Nick Fit is not great in a very heavy controlled metagame. It has inevitability, but it needs to land creatures to do its thing. So if you can keep the board clear, that it's just kind of poop. So that's where I am on Fiend Artisan.
That's fair.
What do you? Give me something else. What do you got?
So one of my other failures, and this is one of the most bizarre things that I just noticed over the last couple days was happening. Shark Token.
That's interesting.
Sold out on TCG. Sold out on Miniature Market. Sold out on Star City. Sold out on Card Kingdom. Listed for $5. But there is play sets available on eBay
for
the
double-sided token?
This is the double-sided token.
So there are a couple of these, apparently. I didn't know that. Ah, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. I just don't think the double-sided token is a $5 token. I don't know any tokens from recent sets that qualify as that. The only one I can think of was Newfi or Worldwake, the goblin that was on the Mythic sheet.
Yeah.
It's the only thing in a recent print run set that comes close to this in terms of value, and like not a misprint, not an oddity in some way, something like that. I just $5. Are you kidding? There's play sets up for $5.
Yeah, people just got their boxes. It's really interesting that this thing has a real price, and I'm trying to find it. Like I played against Shark Typhoon in EDH for the first time this past weekend, and it put in some work.
Yeah.
Like that card is the real deal.
That's great.
And here at TCG Player, market's $5.33 for token 004 in particular. Mm-hmm. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Nope. It definitely does not make sense. All right, so jumping back to cards that have a price, right now, the next card I want to talk about is Kenon, Bonder Prodigy. This is the Simic. This is a pseudo birding. The Simic Mono Reflection. Right.
Yeah.
So I didn't think this card would have a real price attached to it. I didn't think it was going to do much. I didn't think Mono Reflections was that popular a card overall, because, what have you. And on a creature, it just makes it even more vulnerable. I guess it's Mono Flare. I'm sorry, not Mono Reflections, Mono Flare. So it costs less, but it's on a 2/2, which makes it really vulnerable. But this is actually seeing play across everything right now. That was surprising to me, that if we take a look at MTG decks, you'll see that, Standard, Modern, Historic, Pioneer, Vintage, there was one Jace Storm list that has this, which is most likely a mislabel of something else. But Kenon is currently being played everywhere it can be, and that keeps this price floating. That means this card is a little more real than something like Fiend Artisan, or something that's a little more obfuscated or propped up a little bit more like Lurrus. So,
yeah, this was actually something I pegged as real. So it's interesting.
So it's played across those formats, right? And to me, this price and the fact that it's been floated for so long, with a little bit of drop from 20 down to 12, is the same kind of price point and the same kind of pricing history, past and what we'll see in the future, as Panharmonicon, where that card was actually priced for EDH out of the gates, and it held steady. So this card is real, and we can point to another card within history that kind of signals that this card is going to hold value because it glommed onto all these formats and EDH. So.
Yep. I think it's pretty great. This was one that I had pegged as real because the exact reason you just explained. Panharmonicon was an EDH card out of the gate. It was priced that way. We're starting to see more and more where these EDH cards don't just tick down and wait for rotation to go back up. They stay up. And that's kind of where I pegged it. We talk about casuals driving the market. Kenon Bonder Prodigy to me was a casual card that I saw, and I'm like, okay, I think this is probably real.
Absolutely.
So,
all right.
I have one more reel that I think is, to toot my own horn, I think is pretty interesting, and that's actually the alt arts overall. So I think prices on this set, and specifically the alt arts, are in a really interesting spot. So there's some of them that are basically the same price as the real card. Narset's sitting in a market of 8 for the alt art. The regular's sitting in a market of about 7. I think these alt arts are going to stay floated because we have such a low production. We're going to have such a low rate of open because we can't have limited events until the end of June. And then we've got a core set coming out. So I don't think we're going to get a lot of population on these. So your Godzilla alt arts, your comic arts, all that stuff. I think those prices, for the most part, are real. I think especially the Triomes are way too affordable right now at $10 or something, typically for all of them. I don't think that's an appropriate price for that card. I think long term those are $20, $25 alt arts based on supply and what we'll have opened. And the fact that you can get foils for the $25 price point is somewhat ludicrous to me. I think these prices right now, being inflated, like a lot of people think they are, is real. I think they'll probably go higher, in fact. And I think that is real because of the supply issue. And, production was hit on this set. We didn't get a whole lot of the commander cards. Boxes, the first print run was a little bit lower than what some people expected, even though the big guys still got their full allocations. I think it'll be very interesting long term because I think all of these are very real prices on these alt arts.
I think so too. I wanted to stay away from the alt arts because the market is volatile right now. There are some that are rising that I didn't think would, and some that are falling that I didn't think shouldn't. There's only a $3 difference in the Lucas right now, and that card is all over standard. So to try and source out why some of those had a price at, and I don't just mean the Toho stuff. I just mean all of them in general, all the showcase stuff. Trying to figure that out was a little too much for me right there. But there is a card I do want to glom onto that you mentioned as being real and. For the showcase art, the comic art in particular. And I want to point out that Narset itself, just the regular version, is a very real card, despite the fact that it's seeing low play in standard, but the fact is it's in the exact same deck that Urion is, except it's not in the Urion version. So if Urion ever gets cut from standard, that's where Lucas price is coming from, so there's a really good chance that Narset holds and increases and goes up over 10. Right now it's floating about 7-ish, maybe 8. I think based on the percentage play that it sees in standard, it should be 4 to 6, but it might float at 8 based on expectation that Urion leaves and this next version of Fires steps up to take its place. So I want to hold on to that before we move on to I guess what we can consider our spectacular failures. So the first fake price that I saw that I thought was going to be the case for a while is Luminous Broodmoth. This card is, since the release of, I guess it was Mothra before we got the actual Luminous art, people had delusions of grandeur about what they were going to be doing with this card, and it has dropped from $30 plus at pre-order down to $11, and I don't think we're near the bottom yet for Luminous Broodmoth.
No.
And for the same reasons as Fiend Artisan. This is being played in a handful of formats, but It is primarily in... let me pull this up because I honestly forgot the deck style. Not Gyruda. It's in Historic, I think. It's another sacrifice style deck. You can it's also seeing play in EDH with something like Urtai the Corrupt, which is also seeing a bounce right now.
Yeah.
Where any value you can get from this is going to be top tier. And here's Urtai the Corrupt. And we're not seeing these decks play out. We're not seeing Abzan Rally and Pioneer. We're not seeing sacrifice style mid-range decks in Modern be played with Luminous Broodmoth, and the EDH playability is really low right now compared to other cards within the set. It just hasn't hit. So the price is more hopeful than it is real. As it continues to drop, and I'll bring up the graph so we can actually take a look at this. I expect that the bottom that we've hit right now, and we've been at for almost a week now, will continue to fall. We'll see this drop to maybe 5 to 8, which I know is a large range, but I really think this is going to continue to drop over time until the band exists, in all honesty.
Yeah. My spectacular failure here was we all saw it coming, Luris. After it was at one point pre-ordering for close to $30. And we're now down to about 5 as this card gradually gets weeded out of formats. It's the first non-manual dexterity card banned in Vintage since Shahrazad, which is absurd. Banned in Legacy, Companion as a mechanic is just bad for the game. Anything that's parasitic like this that you can't interact with, it's not great. I think especially in the case of Luris, it's only a matter of time before we see it get banned in either Standard or Modern. And when that happens, it's going to be real bad for the value of the card. Like,
100%.
Real bad. And that's my spectacular failure because I don't see it.
No,
staying.
not at all.
I just don't.
It is the last individual card I have on my list as, and right now the price on it is real, but that's because Standard, Modern, and Pioneer are currently being molded. Like we're finding the bottom where these three formats are still going to drive it, but the moment it gets banned, it's going to be a $1 to $3 card because it will only be legal in EDH, and that's it.
Yep.
So it's in a weird spot where the moment it's removed, the price that we have is fake. But in all honesty, the price has really been fake the entire time, and it's only been the fact that we've been able to play this in tournaments, that WotC granted us the ability to play this card in tournaments, that it ever held any kind of quote-unquote real value. Yeah. So I'm glad we kind of both narrowed in on that one as being just absolutely rancid.
Yeah, for sure.
I do have a group of cards, and I want to stress group here, that I think are all fake at the moment. And that group is just the standard Triumphs. No showcase art, no foils, just regular set Triumphs. Right now, they're all floating between $5 and $7. It doesn't matter what one it is. It's somewhere between there, maybe closer to $6 and $7. And the reason I think they're floating is people are still experimenting with them and trying to figure out what is the correct number of Triumphs to play in every format.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, the older you go, the closer you're going to get to 1 as the correct number, maybe even 0 in certain formats. So until that's figured out, the price on these is really just fake for the most part. I'm actually not sure what decks are playing 4 of any of them outside of Standard right now. I think there might be a version of Jeskai Fires that plays all 4, but other than that, it's just kind of question marks. On top of that, as you mentioned, we have the showcase arts for these, which are, compared to the set version, stunning, despite the fact that by population they are a lot more scarce. I believe the showcase version is going to just suppress these this regular set versions, the draft booster version, whatever it is.
And the interesting thing too is that, looking at, I'd take Savai Triumph as an example. Low is 4.25 right now on the pack card. Low is 7 for the showcase. So for basically $2 more, you can get the, as you said, just stunning artwork of it that's lower supply and is, I think to a lot of people something that's a little bit more meaningful, because it's something cool and alternative to what you would normally get. Not to mention, EDH players love these cards, and EDH players love Pimp in every single form they can find it.
And for only $1 or $2 more, why not go for the Pimp version? I just think these are going to be completely overshadowed. It's not like the comic book art or the Toho art, which is very subjective. These extended border stuff, generally speaking, people by and large really enjoy, unless the delta in price is huge, and at which point, that's based on the individual. So is there anything else you had pinned as a failure overall, or rather a fake price? I think failure is a little harsh.
No, it was Fiend. I had 3 of each, and Fiend Artisan was my failure that we shared, and Narset was my truth that we shared.
There is one last card I do have as a hopeful, and that I believe is, I think how you pronounce it, is Riel. Riel is the Is It Mythic? And I'll pull this up in a moment. Sorry, just give me a second. That people have been unsure of what to do with. And you can see it pre-ordered at 30, tanked immediately, jumped to 20 as people started testing it, and it's been slowly floating down. And I think right now we are seeing a price that is based on hope alone. In testing, that's how it's been. It's very polarizing. So I think $6 is hopeful for this card, because if it works in some format, then $6 is going to look just fine when that card pushes 10 plus. If it does nothing and it drops below 6 at any point in time, any sales you made at 6 are gravy. So it's just kind of exists, and it's a very hopeful price. Rael's a little interesting, and part of the reason why a lot of people want to toy with this is the discard clause on it looks at all cards you discard the first time in any given turn. So if you cast a Wheel of Fortune style effect and you discard 7 cards, you draw, is it 2 times? So you draw that many cards, and then you draw for Wheel. So you would discard 7, draw 7 for Rael, and then draw another 7. So in a format like Modern, where Faithless Looting was just banned, does this have a place in a Phoenix style deck where you just want to churn through? And this gives you card advantage for the first spell you cast each turn, or more spell advantage, or card advantage rather, for each spell you cast. It makes you discard a card each turn. Cathartic Reunion makes you discard up front, and you're going to redraw for those immediately on top of the additional effect of the card. Could this be busted? Don't know. And so it just kind of floats along.
It's one of those interesting things where in Magic, cards that deal with manipulating your own hand through discard or graveyard through discard, they're boom or bust. And it's only ever one thing away from boom. But it's, a million things could happen that make it a bust. But if that one thing happens, it's great. I've got like 100-something Shadow of the Graves because I'm expecting a
that's
boom, right?
Is that return all cards you cycled this turn to your hand? Shadow of the Grave?
It's everything you discarded, I believe.
Okay.
Shadow,
that you cycled or discarded this turn. Yeah.
Yep, cycled or discarded. So that's my pick for it. That's a perfect example of a boom bust graveyard discard effect, and that's how it's always been in Magic. Probably how it's always going to be with that stuff, and
absolutely. And does that card slide into EDH? Yes, absolutely. And it doesn't have to go in any type of specific deck. It's probably worse as a commander than it is in the 99 because it's very restrictive, and the triggered ability on it to pump only makes itself big. So you're really only going to be maybe icing one person at a time with Rael, unless you're taking multiple turns. And there are ways to do it, I'm sure, but most likely going to be better than 99.
Yeah.
So, but I think that covers the majority of the set. After that, it's just kind of crufty. It's a lot of the stuff that was banned. It's some of the companions that are seeing low-level play, like the Gruul Elk and the Selesnya Cat Nightmare Beast, whatever pumper that's seeing play in hard control decks that have no creature finishers in the main, so you just pull one out of your sideboard. I think Lutri is floating around on there because people are testing weird decks in Modern where you just play a bunch of one-ofs that are like worse lightning bolts. So people are still working on this and figuring it out, and as more FNMs are happening on Moto, we're getting a little more data back over time to see what is happening, but there were definitely some immediate calls that we could make as to like, yo, this is
where we're at.
Absolutely.
Picks?
What do you got for me?
So my pick this week is C20 Propaganda. So Propaganda is a card that periodically picks up and stabilizes at around $10. Right now, courtesy of the C20 release, we're back down to around 5, which is pretty good because you're seeing stuff like EDH casual staples have the best chance of rebounding from a reprint. Look at Eternal Witness, Lightning Greaves, Swiftfoot Boots to an extent. These are all cards that are perpetually like $4 to $6 bills. Maybe not Swiftfoot Boots, that's about 2, but Greaves and E-Witness are always going to be that amount because there is an absurd amount of demand for this casual type of high power interaction. And I think that, sitting now at like $4 or $5, that's much too affordable. It should be about 10. And I think that if you can pick them up from locals and trade or for about, $4, great. You saved me the effort. I don't think there's really a way you can lose.
No.
I specifically went after C20 just because it's the most recent one we have. So it's going to be the most easily accessible right now. But the fact of the matter is all of those have dropped in price. Every Propaganda, every printing, everything. So, right now the low is about $4 or $5. Looks like $5.50. And Card Kingdom's buying them for about $4 and $4.75 credit. So it's a pretty good, the delta is very narrow. It's a high access. There's a lot of population of it out there right now because most of the people that got the Commander decks and used them, I probably got them for the Force of Negate or whatever was in there. And I think, I think it's a good opportunity. It's incredibly liquid. It's something that anyone that looks through your trade binder has a very high chance they're going to want. And I think that that's really good to have because even if the liquidity is not spectacular, it at least means that you have a chance every time someone looks.
And Propaganda and Ghostly Prison, the same card, just white and blue, right, are very polarizing for people to play.
Yeah.
Some people don't want to be that person to kind of wall up behind it, so they will, like you said, buy the deck for some other odds and ends they needed, and it just became more reasonable to buy the entire deck than piecemeal it. And so a card like Propaganda just goes into their trade stock because they're not that kind of player. And a lot of times you find that.
Yeah.
Or they might have one deck where they only need Propaganda because that's the theme to the deck, right? So all the rest of them are there. And the other telling sign about a rebound on this card is the fact that the delta is only about $1.50 cash and 75 cents, 85 cents in trade. And it just hit market. I mean, that should let you know that people are outing this card or shorting this card because they cracked the blue the Jeskai deck, I think it is. So stock aside, people are racing to the bottom, and if you buy in now or if you're able to trade in now, you're going to be able to get out of this card at a profit in the next couple of months.
So
I think
I think it's solid, and I think it's C20 is probably the one product especially that is going to be insanely limited out of Ikoria.
Yeah. No, it's nice. This is also a card that I always forget about when it comes out in Commander. I think I remembered Ghostly Prison because it only had one printing before it was reprinted, so there was hubbub about it, but Propaganda has come out so many times, I just stopped paying attention. And it just keeps rebounding really well. So it is... And it's a card I never remember to look at, or look up, rather, when I'm looking through binders, to either for myself or when I'm out working. It's just... It completely slips in my mind. Because, like I said, it's always a constant, and I always think it's worth less than it is. It's like Blasphemous Act. Same thing. Sticking with the EDH trade, my pick for the week is Illusionists Bracers. This is a card that I've kind of been waiting on for a while because I've had my own copies, and then eventually I forgot about them and remembered when I saw them pop up on some hot lists this week. And the demands on this is ridiculous. Like, the slope on this card is insane. There's only been the one printing from Gatecrash. The interesting part about this is that Card Kingdom, when I when I decided on Illusionist Bracers as my pick in the 5 days between then and now, they were buying 6 at $2.50 cash, $3.25 trade. Today they are buying 16 at $3 cash, $3.90 trade. So in that time, this card has gone up. Be a patron. You would have found this out earlier. Or pick one up way early on this. And
true.
The thing that I like about this card is that it is very obvious in what it does. You don't dance around with this card. It goes in some very specific decks when compared to other artifacts, in the sense that your general or your 99 has to have an activated ability for this thing to be worthwhile. It's not Soul Ring. It's not a Talisman.
Yeah.
It's not a Monorok of any sort. It's not Isochron Scepter. This has to be what you're doing in your 99. But the other thing is that when you look at this card and you look, okay, what are people possibly doing? The answer to this question is literally everything. Everything is on this.
Yeah.
You have control with stuff like Visara the Dreadful and Kumano. You have combo decks in here with like Zerillion of the Claw, like Dragon combo. And then you have whatever the hell Experimental Courage does. The Kiki Jiki is also combo.
Yeah.
This card just goes in everything big and dumb. And it just casts this really wide net in the format. And it's a card that I like now for the short term, and then again for the long term, because I think in the interim we're going to get a reprint of this card. It's going to crash the market, and then we're going to come back. If you have the ability to buy in now, I would probably try and move in, especially if you can trade for it. This card is generally speaking undervalued, so you can kind of get it at the end of trades to fill gaps, etc. And if and when we see this again in a master set somewhere, in a commander set, I would pick up again immediately when the floor falls out from under this thing, because it's just going to go up again. It's done nothing but rise since 2016. Battle for Zendikar. 2015 Battle for Zendikar. This is as close to like an unprint or a non-reprinted blue chip as you're going to get in the modern era for EDH that isn't like hard driven to EDH.
Yeah.
So
it's also interesting looking at TCG. Low with shipping for non-foil is $5.50. Low with shipping for foil is $8.50. So there's only a $3 difference between the foil and non-foil printings. So even foil is just, it does not have the standard EDH pimp multiplier on a single print run card.
And I believe you can actually immediately
it's just opportunity.
You cannot immediately arbitrage the foils unless you actually $6 plus a dollar, that's $7.50. You could, if you wanted to, right now. You could arbitrage any near mint foils that you can get for under $8.60 on TCG Player to Card Kingdom. Just hard right now. There's only maybe 6 of them, but it is possible. After they run out, then it just goes from $10 all the way up to $20. So this is a card with very low supply. There's 15 unique prices for foils. This looks like there's 18, 21, 24, 29, 30 total foil copies on TCG Player in English. Oh no, my math was wrong. 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. There are 23 total foils left on TCG Player. 23. For non-foil, there are 91 unique prices. And draining if Card Kingdom's buy list is left to be believed, which is, like I said, in the last 4 days, we've gained 50 cents on the buy list. Not a lot, but that just goes to show, even in the short run, demand for this card. So, yep. If it's a card that you think you have because you played a lot in that era, chances are you picked it up for the limited format because it was moderately okay there. Now would be the time to out as bulk.
Yeah.
If you have it. You're not going to play it, just take your money and run, man. But
yeah.
That's my pick.
I like it. I completely forgot that this card has not been printed since the first printing. So it's definitely definitely something that flew below my radar, and I love the casual EDH specs.
Somewhere
so
behind me, by the Trifula tree in my background, there exists a foil copy sitting on top of a deck box because it stagnated for so long, but I wanted to make sure it sat literally at the top of my mind. So every time I walk by that, I see it. And now I know. It's finally going off.
Yeah.
So
there you go.
That's it for my pick this week. And I think we're good to go, right? Anything else? All right, man.
Yeah, that's it for
so
me.
next week we will be choosing the winner of our IKO box, and we will announce that on the pod, and that will come from our patrons directly. So you have between now and 11:59 p.m. next Sunday when we poll. That'll be when things are frozen and pulled. And in the meantime, you can find us on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and Patreon, and wherever you are listening or watching to this, just feel free to interact with us. I posted a question on Twitter looking to see or get a feel for what people are looking for a little more in these kind of trying times, because there's not a lot going on in the vendor world. We're pretty stagnant on this end. Nobody's holding events, so I'm not going out doing any kind of work. You're doing work, but it's literally your day to day, because there's nothing to do over.
I'm in the cage, So we're just
we're looking for feedback. So feel free to interact with us, across the board. If you like what you hear, give us a like or a review, what have you. We're trying to build this thing up and trying to get people to learn a little more what it's like to be a vendor in this industry and what we see on our ends and how things function. So, as always, we're approachable. So we are at MtG Cabalcast across all mediums and now Spotify. I am at Haltai Reptar on Twitter. You are
at Thirsty Sizzler on the Twitter.